All right. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. We are, oh, I gotta shoot before. Yeah. Okay. We are on Ladder of Divine Ascent, part 10. And I am going to just um, mute my Zoom link here. If anybody wants to talk to me, they can. And just have the book. We're going to go through some sections of the book. And hopefully those of you that have the PDF can follow along. Our first step is on step number 10. Part of me, I didn't quite line up the parts of the liturgy where we say, or the part of the liturgy where we say, cleanse us from all blemish, all guile, all hypocrisy, all malice, and the remembrance of evil entailing death. I didn't line those up, and I'm wondering about those now because step 9 said malice. It says, and we say in the liturgy, malice and the remembrance of evil entailing death. But here, John Climacus is saying malice is the remembrance of wrongs. So maybe it's the remembrance of wrongs and the remembrance of evils. It's maybe two different things. Anyway, something for us to think about. But when we move to slander, I have, a few areas that I'd like to highlight. First off, slander, he says, is the child of hatred and the remembrance of wrongs. Of course, right? I remember somebody did something wrong to me, so I slander them. I say something evil about them. I speak evil of them. Or I hate somebody, so I speak evil of them. So it is rightly called the child of hatred and the remembrance of wrongs. On that same page 155 in the book that we have, towards the bottom, he says, if, as you insist, he says, if, as you insist, you love that man. Because some people will say, I was only talking about him because I love him and I want him to do better. I want her to do better. I just talking about it as a kind of to see how we can troubleshoot and problem solve and help the individual. And so under the kind of guise of wanting to help the individual, we spread the malice or the slander, the story. But he says, if you do love that person, that man, then do not make a mockery of him, but pray for him in secret, for this is the kind of love that is acceptable to the Lord. So rather than talking to others about this individual, we ought to talk to God. And you'll notice that for every vice he writes about, he's going to also talk about a virtue or a way to overcome that vice. And this is how we move up that ladder of divine ascent. He says on the next page, he says, if you want to overcome the spirit of slander, blame not the person who falls, but the prompting demon. That story that I love, it's often said by different priests here and there. When imagine a person comes with a baseball bat and starts, hitting you with a baseball bat, and then drops the bat and runs away. And you pick up the bat and you start to yell at the bat, slap the bat, say, this is the last time you're going to touch me. You're never going to hit me again. I hate you, right? Say it's ridiculous because it's not the bat that is the problem. It is the person that was holding the bat. Therefore, you should not be looking at the demon or at the person who did some evil to you, but you should be looking at the demon who did the evil. The other thing he says to do is that when you hear somebody slandering another person, he says, you should say this, brothers, stop it. Like, don't stop slandering. I do worse things every day, so how can you criticize him? So basically, he says, you do two things. You heal yourself because you humiliate yourself and you confess your sin, not openly, but you confess being worse than this individual in order to heal yourself. And you heal your neighbor with the one bandage. How do you heal your neighbor? You stop them from slandering. So you're doing two things, which I thought was pretty remarkable. Then later on, he says, listen to me, all you accountants of other people's faults. All you accountants of other people's faults, listen well, for if, as is certain, it is true that you shall be judged with the judgment you have used yourself, then whatever sin of body or spirit that we ascribe to our neighbor, we will surely fall into ourselves. Um, Next, he says, anyone untrammeled by self-love and able to see his own faults for what they would worry about, for what they are, they would worry about no one else in this life. He would feel that his time on earth did not suffice from his own mourning, even if he lived 100 years, and even if a whole Jordan of tears poured out of his eyes. Mourning of this kind has, I know, no trace in it of slander or harsh judgment. Just examining yourself will free you from any desire or inclination to speak ill of another person, right? The idea is that St. John Climacus is saying 100% positive, you will have no time to think or act or speak about anyone who has done anything ill, even if what they've done is egregious. You have no time for it because you will just have enough time to mourn, if that, your own sins. And he says, be careful. Then at last page says, to pass judgment on another person is to usurp shamelessly a prerogative of God, and to condemn is to ruin one's soul. To judge somebody, and that's what we do when we slander, is to say, hold on, God, I got this. I'm going to judge this person. You don't have to do anything. I got this. I'll do this by myself. And we know that that's God is the one who will judge, and who will judge the living and the dead. So finally, he says, second to last paragraph, do not condemn, not even if your very eyes are seeing something, for they may be deceived. And this is true as well. Now, you might be seeing a sin um, being, right in front of you. Don't say anything. Don't condemn. Don't slander the person, because you might be wrong. You don't know everything. So that's a short one on slander. Any additions on that, or any thoughts on that?
Where's the line?
There is no line.
Like, when do you say something?
I don't think he says there's ever, there's very few times where you should say something, if ever, to anyone. Maybe to a spiritual father, but it has to be with such purity of heart. It's almost like if you have any malice or any sort of disdain for this person, any sort of feeling of self-righteousness, any feeling that you're right and they're wrong, and oh, thank God I caught them in the wrong. Oh, this is going to be so good. They deserve it, right? Any sort of sense of that, I think St. John Climacus said, don't say anything.
But what if you have all of those feelings to the thing, not the person, but to that action or to whatever that behavior was?
I think if you have love for that person, you can approach that person and speak to them straightforward. I don't think your love will be misunderstood or misinterpreted in any way.
Just like when Jesus was talking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and he said, you are without sin,
Cast
first, stone, right? Or
Yeah.
it was out of love.
Yeah, I mean, of course we go to Christ. And that's something he says, pray about that person. And I think if you pray about that person, God is the one who will reveal. Now, keep in mind that this is, if someone is getting, like a child is getting abused in the home, we're not talking about that level, right? We're talking, and there are times where we do need to kind of move in, but not in a slanderous way. You're a lawyer, you should know what's slander.
Actually, I don't. Does
It's
slander
like it's
imply that it's a
defamation.
third party?
Slander, it's basically, it could be defamation, and the defense to defamation is it's true. So defamation, or even something that's true, if that makes sense. We step away from accusations that are not being delivered in a sense of love, or that will render healing, but more will cause embarrassment.
It's reputational damage.
Right, reputational damage. Yeah.
What if you're talking to that person directly? Does
I
that
don't
not
think
count
that-
as slander?
No, I don't think it counts as slander. I think there's a place for that. It's when you talk to a third party. Okay, so the next step on talkative and silence, talkativeness and silence. I I like I like this one. So there's a lot of wisdom here, and it's more than I understand. Talkativeness, he says in the third paragraph, is the throne of vainglory, because I feel I have something valuable to say. Step 11.
Yeah.
I have something valuable to say. I must say it. On which it loves to preen itself and show off. Talkativeness is a sign of ignorance, a doorway to slander, a leader of jesting, a servant of lies, the ruin of compunction, a summoner of despondency, which we'll talk about soon, messenger of sleep, dissipation of recollection, the end of vigilance, the cooling of zeal, the darkening of prayer. So basically, if I want any of this, or I don't want any of this, I should avoid talkativeness. But he talks about the virtue, intelligent silence. I wish I knew that Greek word, intelligent silence. It says intelligent silence is, and I think intelligence meaning like from the logos, the rationale, the silence of, but it's not I guess the opposite would be an unintelligent silence, but it's an intelligent silence, which I'm not judging, I'm not saying anything, but I'm in my soul, in my heart, in my mind. I'm saying, it says it's the mother of prayer, freedom from bondage, custodian of zeal, a guard on our thoughts, a watch on our enemies, a prison of mourning, a friend of tears, a sure recollection of death, a painter of punishment, a concern with judgment, servant of anguish, foe of license, a companion of stillness, the opponent of dogmatism, a growth of knowledge, a hand to shape contemplation, hidden progress, secret journey upward. This is for the man who recognizes his sins, has taken control of his tongue, while the chatterer has yet to discover himself as he should. The lover of silence draws close to God. He talks to him in secret, and God enlightens him. Jesus, by his silence, shamed Pilate, and a man by his stillness conquers vainglory. Peter wept bitterly for what he had said. He had forgotten the one who declared, I said, I will guard my ways so that I may not sin with my tongue. He has forgotten too the saying, better to fall from a height to the ground than to slip with the tongue. It's said that, I see a note here. It is said that better, even if you have something to say, even if it has something to, someone is saying in their translation, it says deliberate silence. Good. So even if I have something to say, I'm in a group and the conversation is like, whatever, we're talking about motorcycles, and I know a lot about motorcycles. I don't know anything about motorcycles, but I shouldn't be so eager to jump in. I shouldn't be like, that's where vainglory comes. That's where my own pride can kick in. But better to hang back. And if somebody asks me for my opinion, take that as maybe a sign from God. But for the most part, not to be so eager to speak as if we know everything, but to love silence. And I'm sure people in our day and age would say, oh, this is, people are, would be in this section here, that means someone's really getting into their head and really getting lost in their thoughts. But I think we have to do battle with our mind and what is called the logismoi, the thoughts that kind of come in and attack us. We have to do battle with that and be willing to. But if it's always noisy all around us, then there's no stillness, there's no silence, and it's constant. Either we're constantly our attention is being captured by that which is around us, or we're just being, kind of talked to death until once we leave. Like, for example, you're listening to music. What's music? Music is taking me away from my thoughts, to listen to something else. And then when I stopped listening to that music, it's still in my mind. It's captured my mind, even for many years and decades. Music is just imprinted on your memory. You have no control over it. It just kind of comes, right? But what you want is to have this ability to be in silence and to be in stillness and to be able to calm and quiet your mind. Talkativeness does not, it agitates. Any thoughts about this one? Okay, let's get to lying.
Deliberate silence.
I know,
Deliberate
I'm
silence.
thinking
Everyone
someone-
Sorry, I broke it.
So falsehood, I love this because it's hard to impress upon kids who often come to confession and say, I lied, I cheated, and it took it, it's such an important unfortunately it's such an important I don't want to say important sin, but it's an important sin to stop doing because of what St. John Clemenco says here in the first line, in the first paragraph. He says lying or perjury is the very denial of God. To lie is to deny God. And this is very simple. I mean, when Christ says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And then he also says about the devil being the father of all lies. It's either you're one side or the other. You're in the dark or you're in the light. You're in the black or the white. You're truth or light or lies. To lie is to align yourself on the other side. He says, no sensible man imagines that lying is a minor failing. Indeed, the all Holy Spirit pronounced the most dreadful sentence on this sin above all others. And if, as David says to God, you will, and if, as David said to God, you will destroy everyone speaking a lie. That's Psalm 5:7. What will happen to those who swear to their lies on oath? So we go not only to lie, but to swear, right? To swear our lies. And he talks about men clowning around and joking. He talks about joking. Now, this is very extreme. I remember when I was a child, or not a child, that was when I was in high school, reading this and thinking, oh, this is really extreme. He doesn't want people joking. He says, do not joke, do not, because in joking we sometimes lie. He says, if you see people joking, break up the bad company in a devout way by setting before them the thought of death and judgment. And if a few drops of vainglory fall on you, what harm? Provide, of course, that you become a source of profit to many. So the idea is that basically, he takes this idea of lying very, very seriously. The man gifted with the fear of the Lord has given up lying, for with him he has conscience, that incorruptible judge. And then towards the end, he says, only when we are completely free, this is important, only when we are completely free of the urge to lie, may we resort to it. And then only in fear and out of necessity. A baby does not know how to lie, and neither does a soul cleansed of evil. When might we find the need to resort to it? This is like extreme situations. This always bugs, how do I say, people very concerned about keeping the Ten Commandments, which we should be, but for them to hear that it's okay to lie.
To your kids.
No.
Dang it. I'm really excited for that.
Oh, yeah, actually, it's so funny. This one comedian said, anyone who said you should never lie to a child has never had kids.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to say all these different things like when the kid wants ice cream, you say, no, you don't want it. It's spicy. You're not gonna like it, which of course is not true. And then, okay, so now, so there's a couple of situations. If someone is doing a sin in front of you, you should lie to yourself and say that it's not a sin. Or the fathers say to yourself, this is just one sin, and he's probably only committed just this one sin. I commit many sins daily, right? So you're lying in order to avoid judging a person. The obvious, example, or the often used example of like Nazis are coming into your house and you have Jews that you're hiding. And they ask you, do you have any Jews that you're hiding? You say, no. Where was the Jew that we saw with you yesterday? Oh, he's 3 towns over. Like this is where it would be acceptable. Of course, not all people would find that acceptable, but definitely the fathers of the church in John Marcus would find that acceptable. Other times you should lie. Your wife tells you, asks you,
Make me look fat.
do I look fat? Yeah, do I look fat in this dress?
Level,
You say yes. You say no, it doesn't. I don't even have to see what your wife looks like. You say no, it doesn't. Like there are certain things where like the truth can hurt, right? And so you have to be very careful. And you can't just say, oh, I was just telling the truth. No, that's not a good use of the truth.
I did that I had a phase. Where I told myself, I'm just gonna speak my mind because there was somebody in my
life. That's the code for, I'm gonna speak my mind. I'm gonna say the truth.
Yeah, that's the slander, the everything. So I was like, because there was somebody who I really respected at the time. I mean, I still do. I'm not as involved in their life, but like we were super close at the time, and I really respected this person because they just shot straight, and it was never emotional. It was never like there was no malice. It was just anything on their mind. They just said it. And I was like, I'm gonna be like that, and it went so badly. Like this guy just had this ability where it didn't hurt when he did it. He would just speak his mind bluntly, and I would laugh it off, and I wouldn't care. But when I did it, it did not work at all.
Yeah,
it was terrible.
St. Arsenius said something beautiful I should always remember. He says, many times I've spoken and regretted it, but I've never regretted silence.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next one, despondency. Despondency is important. And it's just small here, but I guarantee you most people are battling with despondency. Despondency is probably sometimes described as depression today. Despondency is it's called akadia in kind of the Greek, and many of the fathers dealt with it. Saint Anthony dealt with it. It said he was overcome, and one of the early sayings of the Desert Fathers of Saint Anthony says he was overcome with despondency. Basically, doesn't know what to do, not really feeling, and he talks about it here. We'll read it, and he says basically an angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, and the angel of the Lord appeared to Anthony and was plaiting palms, doing work, standing up for prayer, and then sitting down and plaiting palms, and then standing up for prayer. And so the angel gave him an example of work and spiritual life. You can't just do all prayer, and you can't do all work, but there needs to be a balance. The other word he uses here is tedium, boredom, but it's not just the boredom. It's like a depression, and he describes it. He says tedium is a paralysis of the soul, slackness of the mind, neglect of religious exercises, a hostility to vows taken. It is an approval of worldly things. It is a voice claiming that God has no mercy and no love for men. It is a laziness in singing the Psalms, a weakness in prayer, a stubborn urge for service, a dedication to the work of the hand, and indifference to the requirement of obedience. And that's probably the worst part of it. Indifference to the requirement of obedience. An obedient person does not know such tedium, for he has used the things of the senses to reach the level of the spirit. He has used the things of the senses, meaning he has used the physical practices, the physical work to reach the level of the spirit, and he has done this through obedience. We are not only are we not caring to be obedient to spiritual fathers. We're not even seeking out guidance from spiritual fathers on what to do and how to overcome spiritual depression. Tedium is rebuffed by community life, but she is a constant companion of the hermit. So basically, those who are in community are encouraged. Come on, let's eat. Come on, let's go pray. Come on, let's go out and do some work. That's what community is there for, and it's beautiful. Last thing he says, or last on this paragraph, or this page 162, doctor calls on the sick in the morning, but tedium visits the hermit at noon. If you've paid attention to the baptism prayers, it speaks about the demon of noonday. The demon of noonday. If you talk in modern society today about the demon of noonday, people would say, "What? Demons don't exist," and they're definitely not. They don't have watches that they're going to know exactly what time it is to come attack you. The demon of noonday is boredom. Is akadia. It is basically the person who in the morning has finished all their work, all their prayers, and basically has free time. And free time is when they get attacked. In the middle of the day, if it's hot or whatever, or there's, I would imagine those who would usually work outside in the desert would come inside, right? And they basically have free time. And so this is where this demon of noonday attacks. And there's a nice book written by a female author. It's called Time and Despondency. Time and Despondency. It's a nice short little book. We might have some copies here. It's a female author. I can't remember her name. The initials N and R stick out. She writes very beautifully on the history of this idea and also how to overcome it. St. John Climacus says something very funny. He says basically, the third hour of the day, the devil of tedium causes shivering and headache and vertigo. Why? Because the third hour is supposed to be the hour of prayer, and so he attacks you. But by the ninth hour, which is the hour of eating, ninth hour is the hour of eating, the patient has recovered his strength, and when dinner is ready, he jumps out of bed. Funny, right? Time for prayer. I'm depressed, can't get up, don't feel like it. All of a sudden, got lots of energy to feed the body, and because it's also the time to be social as well. Tedium or boredom or on the despondency makes us sleepy when it's time to pray. And the second we start to pray, we find our mouths yawning. That's why the monastics, you'll notice when they start to yawn, they do the sign of the cross over their mouth. That's because to keep that, it's that idea that this is the demon of noonday trying to make them sleep. And Pope Shenouda used to say this: every time you stand up for praying your Igbeya, you will feel tired and you will feel sleepy. Keep going. Power on through, and it will leave you. And you'll find after one or two Psalms, the devil has left. Right? Yeah. So this is what's beautiful. He says the real men of spirit can be seen at the time when tedium strikes, for nothing gains so many crowns for a monk as the struggle against this. What's that? The idea of when we pray, we struggle in our prayers, as opposed to there are times in our lives when we pray and things are good and feel good and everything is good and everything is right? And we really feel the presence of God. We love to pray. We're receiving our reward. We receive our reward there. The God is giving us, is blessing us that we pray. But he says, when we are struck with tedium, nothing gains so many crowns for a monk as a struggle against that. Note how tedium hits you when you are standing. And if you sit down, it suggests that you should lean back. So it's basically sit down, recline, kick your feet up. It suggests that you prop yourself up against the walls of your cell. Produces noise and footsteps, and when you go and then you go peeping out your window. So it's like you hear something, noise, and want to see what's going on. And this reminds me, people often come to me and they'll say, Abuna, it's hard for me to stand up for prayer. Can I sit down while I pray? I have to remind them, the standard, the position of prayer is standing. That's the position. We make exceptions here and there, sitting and kneeling, but that's the position. And it reminds me of the smokers that went to the Father confession. One guy says, Father, I smoke a lot. Is it okay if I still pray? And the Father's like, of course, you should pray. And the other smoker goes and says, Father, is it okay if I pray while I smoke? He says, no, you shouldn't be praying while you smoke. You should give time, don't smoke while you pray. So everyone is kind of given a little bit of a different answer. And so it's the same, like, is it okay if I sit down while I pray? No, you should stand up. Father, I get really tired and I can't stand up for long periods of time. I do my best, but is it okay if I can't stand up to still pray while I'm sitting? Yeah, of course. It's not the end of the world, but it shouldn't be the default. Is it okay if I pray while I lie down sleeping on my bed? It's not the best position. Try to get up unless you can't. So it's just, keep that in mind. The man who mourns for himself does not suffer from tedium. The tyrant should be overcome by the remembrance of past sins. So when I remember my past sins, I say to myself, no, I got to get up and pray. Or battered by hard manual labor. I'm not really in this. I'm doing the work. Or brought to book by the thought of the blessings to come. So I'm encouraged by what is to come. That's why I overcome this desire to just sleep. But ultimately, it's people who are completely obedient to the rules, obedient to the laws, obedient to the Father confession. But he says now, towards the end of 163 and beginning of 164, he says, I have many mothers. I have many mothers. The unemotional soul, forgetfulness of the things of heaven. So when I'm forgetful, I'm depressed, or I don't care. Right? Too heavy a burden of troubles. That's another one of mothers. So when I'm like just so overwhelmed and depressed by all the issues and problems I have, I don't feel like praying. And he says, and I have many children. When I am despondent, I have many children. What's one of the children? Changing from place to place. So that's something among the monks. I don't like St. Macarius. I'm going to go to St. Bishoy. I don't like St. Bishoy. I'm going to go to this monastery. I don't want to be in the monastery. I want to be in the hermit. I don't want to be a hermit. I want to be in. It's this. And by the way, you find that among, there's servants, right? I don't like doing this Sunday school class. I want to do this one. I don't like this anymore. I want to do another one. It's from a spirit of despondency or disobedience to one's superior. I don't want to do what he says, so I'm going to do what I say. And then when you try to do what you want to do, you find that there's no blessing, and you find that it's not beneficial. Forgetfulness of the judgment to come, because I'm so fixated on myself, and I'm so, what makes me happy or what I want to do. And then, of course, sometimes it's the abandonment of one's vocation. I don't want to be a priest anymore. I don't want to be a monastic anymore. I don't want to be married anymore, right? So that's what could come from this. But the singing of psalms and manual labor are my opponents, by whom I am now bound. My enemy is the thought of death, by what really slays me in prayer, backed by a firm hope in the blessings of the future. And as to who gave birth to prayer, you must ask her. That's going to be another step. That's despondency. Any thoughts or additions on that one?
I love that quote. Despondency dries up the tears of compunction and blinds the eyes of the heart.
Yeah. Where's that?
I don't know where it is in the book. I just have it in my notes.
Yeah. I remember reading that.
Seems like a really good summary.
It's definitely something that people need to be very aware of. Okay, step 14, we're almost there. I wanted to do step 14 and step 15, but maybe just 14 today will work. Step 15 is a doozy. Step 15, I was very surprised by, I mean, I haven't read it in so long, but this guy could have been, writing to people today, as well as gluttony, by the way. But I think I put in, yeah, I have this. He could have been writing to people addicted to pornography. I mean, his in chastity was so on point. So gluttony is going to be a big one. Gluttony is hypocrisy of the stomach. What do you mean he's a hypocrisy of the stomach? Filled, it moans about scarcity. Stuffed and crammed, it wails about its hunger. That's what gluttony is. Gluttony is when you've eaten and you still want more. But he says about this one, he says gluttony is one of those issues that I don't know if anyone ever frees himself from it. Gluttony thinks up seasonings, creates sweet recipes, and stop up one urge and another bursts out. Stop that one and you unleash yet another. Gluttony has a deceptive appearance. It eats moderately, but wants to gobble everything at the same time. A stuffed belly produces fornication, while a mortified stomach leads to purity. And that's where we're really going to see both two problems and two solutions: gluttony, fornication, fasting, and purity. And that's why chastity comes right next to it, right afterwards. While a mortified, the man who pets a lion may tame it, but the man who coddles the body makes it ravenous. So you have to take away the seeming delights or the small things that we do in order to just make us feel better. One of the individuals was telling us about his grandfather on Sunday. He says, my grandfather liked rice. Rice is fasting. But even in the fast, what he would do is he'd take rice and pour a whole cup of water on it, make it cold and mushy, and then he would eat it. Tasteless, right? Just so that he doesn't satisfy himself. As long as, on the next page, 166, as long as the flesh is full of vigor, we should everywhere and at all times cultivate temperance. And when it has been tamed, something I doubt can happen this side of the grave, we should hide our achievement.
Wait, this made me feel so much better though. Like that statement of like, there's no point where you're just like done.
Yeah.
Because it's never worked for me ever. Like any fast, any whatever. It's like, it's always just like this short term like restriction and then this like gorging after. And I hate that. Like defeats the whole point to me. Like, or this idea that like one time we had an announcement, it's like the fast starts tomorrow. Like if you want to go to like In and Out at night or whatever. And I'm like, if I let myself start thinking that way, that like scarcity mindset or whatever, then I could suspend it for a period, but then I'm just going to come back with such a vengeance after that I will have nullified the whole time.
Yeah, so the two things there, St. John Chrysostom would say, why would you poison yourself before you get the treatment? That's what he would say about going In and Out the day before. And the best beginnings of the fast for me have always been ones where I'd skip dinner the night before. So I'm not even like, oh, I got one more opportunity to eat whatever I want to eat. And I'm like, whatever, I'm going to just start from now. But the idea is that it is never done. And that's why that gorging afterwards, that's what you really have to protect yourself against. So every fast, Easter should be something simple. and the next few days should be something simple. We confuse ourselves, or we hurt ourselves when we go back into everything all at once. And it doesn't even necessarily mean that you should introduce all this stuff back. You should realize life is beautiful without all this stuff. I feel, physically, I feel lighter. The cloud is gone from my face, the fog from my head. I feel good. I feel good, right? Whereas, the second dairy and cheese enter my system, I just feel like, like just stuffed up, and I might have some medical issues, but at least, I shouldn't. Anyway, that's just with that kind of thing. But then there's music and watching, I tell people don't watch any TV during this time, don't be on social media. And then people are like, oh, now I can go back. No, maybe you should have just experienced life without it and say, okay, I can live like this for the rest of my life.
But social media is so much different, I think, than what he's talking about, because like I stopped going on social media, or I have it where I only like I need to be on it for something, then I'll go. But like when it comes to food, like, and when I stopped social media, I genuinely felt better without it, and I never put it back on my phone again, like from that moment forward. But with food, I feel like there's never, like, your body is always mandating you to eat. It's like the drug that you can't, like, you cannot be abstinent from that drug. Like, I don't have a problem with cocaine because I don't need cocaine. If I started taking it, sometimes I'd have a problem with it, but I don't need it.
I think you find the solution there. The solution there is just simplicity in what we eat and how we eat. I don't think we need to eat as much as we think we need to eat.
What's your opinion on like fasting being more about like, of course, like the abstinent period, but also like not really worrying about what do I eat after versus worrying about both, or worrying so much about what we're eating too? Because like for Lent, for me, my health deteriorates in the Lent. But the other fasts, like the pescatarian fasts, I do great. But this fast in particular, I deteriorate.
Yeah, let's talk about that offline.
Oh,
Because
sure,
I think,
forgot. Sorry.
no, I think fasting is essential and needs to be done, and I have thoughts on how you can try and break into that. The idea is to kill the palate. He says it here, kill the palate, and where you are so overjoyed to have a piece of cucumber or a celery stalk, right? But if you have a celery stalk and some protein bar, and you go for the protein bar and you don't want to even look at the celery stalk, then you're not really fasting. It's not that protein bars are bad, it's just that you're not really hungry. If you can differentiate, like I'll put things in front of my kids, I'll be like, hey, here's some fresh fruits, and I don't want to eat that. Right? You're not really hungry then. But you put potato chips, all of a sudden, you can devour a whole bag of potato chips. That's not good. So clean eating is important. Anyway, the next paragraph in 166, he talks about, I've seen elderly priests tricked by demons so that on feast days, they dispensed the young men with a blessing. Basically, they gave them permission, though they were not in their charge, from abstinence from wine. So they said, you can have a little bit of wine. Now, if priests giving such permission are quite clearly holy men, we may indulge, but within limits. If such priests tend to be careless, then we should ignore the permission they give. And we should do so, especially if we are in the thick of the fight against the flesh. On the next page, it says, control your appetites before they control you. And I love that word appetites, even though he talks about belly. I would expand the idea of appetites to everything. Social media, of course, drugs, of course, even just, what we call adrenaline junkies. Maybe not. I mean, you have to control it, right? You have to control it, and he likes to do crazy things. That's why. But the idea is that it has to be, instead of like increasing, like somebody will always tell me, oh, you have to try this. Like, why do I want something else that's going to cause me to desire it? Why do I want to try that, right? Now, this one person, I joke with them. They made this cake before the fast. It was unbelievable. Now in my mind, 40, like I'm gonna have this in my mind, and I didn't even know that this was something I liked, right? Now I like it. It's something added. So don't just be, thinking about your stomach. Here it says the belly on the page 68, 168, the belly is the cause of all human shipwreck. A fasting man prays austerely, but the mind of someone intemperate is filled with unclean imagings. A full stomach dries up one's weeping, whereas the shriveled stomach produces these tears. And the man who looks after his belly and at the same time hopes to control the spirit of fornication is like someone trying to put out a fire with oil. It doesn't work. Begrudge the stomach, and your heart will be humbled. Please the stomach, and your mind will turn proud. And if you watch yourself early in the morning, at midday, and in the hour before dinner, you will discover the value of fasting. For in the morning, your thoughts are lively. Basically, your mind is everywhere. By the 6th hour, you have grown quieter, and by sundown, they are finally calm. This is the power of fasting. Fight as hard as you can against the stomach and let your vigilance hold it in. Make the effort, however little, and the Lord will quickly come to help you. The man who stuffs food into his stomach expands his insides, whereas the man who fights his stomach causes it to shrink, and once it has shrunk, there is no possibility of overeating, and henceforth one fasts quite naturally. This guy's better dieting advice than what we hear today. He talks about two things that can help overcome the stomach or gluttony. First is hard work, and the second is keeping vigil, which is to stay awake. And when you get sleepy, turn to manual work, but keep away from that if you happen not to be sleepy, because he just doesn't want it to become all about work. Now, it's interesting. He says this. I've never experienced this because maybe I don't fight against gluttony as much as I ought to, but I've never found that keeping vigil, like prayers and stuff, because when I'm tired, there's two things I need to do. Either I need to sleep or I need to eat. Like and I've talked to a lot of people about this. When I am exhausted, it's either sleeping or eating. There's no in between. So I don't know. I have to kind of test this out a little bit. But anyway, he talks a lot about how the demon of gluttony comes, and then afterwards his best friend, the demon of fornication. So spirit of fornication comes right afterwards. So the two are together, and the fathers would say the navel and the sexual organs are very close to each other. That's how they kind of put this, in your mind. Think about the two affect each other, and they deal with nocturnal emissions, with dreams, without dreams. It basically says the two are very much tied together. But to fast, on page 169, he says towards the end, to fast is to do violence to nature. To fast is to do away with whatever pleases the palate, which is important. Fasting ends lust, roots out bad thoughts, frees one from evil dreams. Fasting makes for purity of prayer, an enlightened soul, a watchful mind, a deliverance from blindness. Fasting is the door of compunction, humble sighing, joyful contrition, and end to chatter, an occasion for silence, a custodian of obedience, a lightening of sleep, health of the body, an agent of dispassion, a remission of sins, the gate indeed, the delight of paradise. this beautiful way of speaking about the power of fasting. And he talks about how we build up an insatiability by habit. And then this unbroken habit of always just constantly eating, creates a dullness of the soul. And the failure to remember death are the roots of my passion. And he says about gluttony, my firstborn son is fornication. The second is hardness of heart. The third is sleepiness. From me flow a sea of dirty thoughts, waves of filth, floods of unknown and unspeakable impurities. My daughters are laziness, talkativeness, familiarity, jesting, facetiousness, contradiction, stubbornness, contempt, and disobedience, stolidity or unemotion of the mind, captivity, boastfulness, audacity, love of worldly things, followed by impure prayer, distracted thoughts, and sudden and often unexpected catastrophes. And then, most of all, my most evil of all my daughters, despair. All of this comes from not controlling our appetites and our gluttony. And those, he says in the last of that paragraph, he says, those who have never tasted Christ inevitably seek pleasure in my sweetness, in the sweetness of gluttony. We have what's called a God-shaped hole, and we try to fill it with everything. And that gluttony, I think, turns to the idea of drugs, sex, alcohol, music, experiences. I want to have fun. I talked about that last week, right? Fun, having fun. That is having fun is maybe not last week, the week before. I don't remember, but the idea of it is just on some level, it's just driving us further and further away from Christ. I believe for us, fasting, and especially in the Coptic Orthodox Church, we hold fasting to such a high degree, and we do it so often, and people ask why. It's because of the experiences of the fathers and the avoidance of sin that we're trying to avoid. And we have to be honest with ourselves, right? We're not even talking about what, like, I don't know, RFK's ideas of how bad our food is today. That whole idea for us is kind of foreign from him, you know? What's the most luxurious food they could have at that time? A little bit of salt and pepper on a piece of fish from the Nile, right? We have recipes upon recipes upon recipes, and some things that just, you know, I mean, just I can make your mouths water if I just start talking about different types of food, and that's literally us lusting after food which will satisfy us for a few minutes, an hour, but have all of these terrible effects afterwards, as opposed to just simple. And I love every now and again I'll come across somebody who says, you know, I eat, you know, oatmeal for breakfast, something for lunch, and this for dinner every day of the week. That's all I eat. That's what I eat. And that beautiful routine and rigidity is a type of fasting. It's a type of austerity, and it's quite beautiful. We want variety, but if I told you you're going to eat the best fasting food for the rest of the week, you'll say no. And there are people and families who don't even eat leftovers, right? They has to be freshly cooked food every day. But okay, but let's say it's the same freshly cooked food for the week. You'll say, I get tired of this. That's not fasting. And you're not hungry. You're really hungry. You'll say, okay, I like this. This is good. So, and he talked a little bit about being thirsty as well, which for me is always very difficult. I can endure hunger for long periods of time. I can endure thirst for very short periods of time. Anyway, any comments or thoughts? All right. Well, next week, God willing, we will go on with chastity. And I suspect that should take some time to discuss avarice, also very important, poverty, on insensitivity, on sleep. Yeah, we can get through a bunch of these small ones. So just kind of keep reading. We might not get we have, I think, about 2 more weeks. I would love it if we could get up to speaking about pride and humility. Those are steps 23 and 25. Oh, and discernment is a good one too. Okay, so we will do our best. We'll do our best to get through all of those.
Seems like with the one about gluttony, you could interchange food with anything that's not of God.
That's not a God.
It's not of God. You know, food is, like you said, like I deal with that too. You were talking about the situation where it's like you fast and then once it's over, it's like you're starving and you want to eat, and so you overcompensate. But it's like that with everything that you try to fast from. You know, if you're fasting from something with your eyes, once you're done with it, your fast, then you like, can easily just fall into that trap. Just seems like there's an infinite number of ways to fill a void or try to fill a void that can only be filled by God.
Yeah, yes and no. I think though that the stomach is so tied to everything else. That's why he has that long, like kind of laundry list of everything affected by gluttony. And that the stomach is so rooted in our bodies that and affects everything. But if you can control it, you can control so much more. But if you can't control it, then you're not going to have a fighting chance in controlling the other things.
Yeah, you said if you can master that, then you can master your soul, right?
Yeah. So it gives us opportunities in our fasts, day in and day out, to say to our bodies, you're not in charge.
What if there's a correlation to being Adam and Eve in the garden?
Yeah.
First and being food related.
Yeah, I mean, there is a major correlation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry, it's not. It's just it came. I don't know,
yeah. There's this part, yeah, where he says, let us put a question to this enemy of ours, this architect of our misfortunes, this gateway of passion, this fall of Adam, yeah. And it's gluttony is definitely such a major sin, and that's why fasting is such a major tool against it. Okay. There's a comment here. I heard from a sermon that all food was created for taste, for pleasure in the beginning, before hunger existed. Can appreciating flavor be meeting wisdom in creation? I don't understand the question. Can appreciating flavor be I think am I just not understanding the like appreciating the beauty of creation? So, oh, okay. Appreciating flavor be like appreciating the beauty of, I think, I mean, flavor, it's okay to appreciate it. I think it's just wrong when we have to overindulge. He called in the beginning, he said, gluttony is the hypocrisy of the stomach, that it's full, and yet it says, I need more. right? And that's I think where we have to understand. It's the idea that you can eat, and even let's say you can eat everything, but don't fill your stomach. So during this fast, try to say, okay, for the next 3 meals, I'm not going to fill my stomach. Are you going to die? No. Are you going to be uncomfortable? A little bit. But you'll live. You'll be okay. And you can do hard things.
I guess you can appreciate, but don't be addicted to
So it's funny because it's not that we're addicted, but we have a need, like Danny was saying before, we have a need for
Yeah.
food.
it. Yeah,
But it's if I have, like, let's say I like one, there's 2 dishes that I'm served, and I like one over the other. But can I say I'll eat this one instead of that one? You know, like if there's like I don't know, falafel and salad, and I prefer salad. I prefer how I feel after salad. Should I eat the falafel? I don't know, you know. You have to kind of or just have a little bit of the salad and not fill yourself with the salad, right? What is it's something that we need to do battle with. We need to think about. We need to be careful of. We need to understand. Um, it's not something we can just take lightly. All right. Go in peace. The peace of the Lord be with you.